to know which sex it is you're looking at, because several species are slightly different coloured depending on whether they're male or female. And females are more likely to spend time flying around individual plants. So whatever their food plant is that they want to lay their eggs on for their caterpillar, they tend to spend a lot of time around those plants. But females spend much less time flying than males anyway, because they're heavier. The females are full of eggs. So you tend not to see females flying about as often as you see males. Anyway, let's crack on. Now, assuming everybody can see my mouse, it is the wing tips of these two species that interest us. Can you see that there is a black background with white spots or dots? That's really important. By and large, if you see a black butterfly with red or orange stripes, it's a red admiral, and that's easy. Painted lady looks orangey. It could be sort of tortoiseshell, comma colour, maybe even speckled wood. But no other butterfly, which is basically orange, has these black and white wingtips. So if you've looked at the wingtips of an orangey butterfly, even as it flies past, and you can see that there are black and white areas, like in the red admiral and the painted lady, then that narrows it down to painted lady if it's orange, and red admiral if it's the black one. So that helps you to distinguish in flight red admiral from peacock. They both look really dark, and the painted lady will look orange, which doesn't help much. It could be a small tortoiseshell, but the black and white wingtips are often visible if you're looking for them. Now I'm going to move on from that, because that's, I think, done. Small tortoiseshell, the blue lunules, as it says at the bottom. The blue lunules are absolutely unique to this species. There is no other butterfly in Britain that has blue lunules around the edge like this. And that's perhaps the best way to identify this. The yellow and black on the top here, which I've heard referred to as being like tiger's stripes, is shared by the comma, the next species. So that isn't really very helpful, but the blue is. And if the butterfly is fresh, even if it's fresh from hibernation, then that blue should be obvious, apart from on the underside, where it isn't always quite as obvious as in this specimen, which was particularly blue. Comma. Okay, at the moment, I think the number of commas around is going down. They come out of hibernation very early. They lay their eggs and vanish until they come back again as a second brood. So the raggedy edge, we've got this same striping of black on an orange background as in the tortoiseshell, but there's no blue lunules. Instead, we've got these obvious yellow marks on the wing edges. But the most obvious thing about the commas wing edges is that they're so ragged. It's especially obvious when it's in silhouette. And that ragged shape, which obviously is the same in every single comma, is a good clue that you are looking at a comma. Other butterflies might have bits missing, but they would be very unlikely to be in that shape. I'll move on again. Speckled woods are much more likely to be seen in gardens which have got some big trees around. They're much more likely to be seen on a footpath if the footpath is containing some bigger trees in the hedge or copses along the edge, something like that. They're not often seen in open areas. You do sometimes see them on grassland, but very rarely. So usually near woodland, but the others could be anywhere, really could. The thing about the speckled wood, and the reason I put it in here, is that some people have, I know it might seem unlikely, but people have seen this yellow edge and thought they might have seen a comma, or equally, they might have seen Duke of Burgundy, which doesn't seem very likely because it's such a rare thing, but people do report the speckled wood as other species because they see these spots, and then when they look things up in a book, they see the pale area on a comma and the sort of yellowy checkers on a Duke of Burgundy. But the speckled wood's a relatively large butterfly, about the same size as a small tortoiseshell. And I think personally that the dark brown background and the rather fluttery flight of a speckled wood compared with the more direct flight of the nymphalids, tortoishells, commas, helps to separate it. peacock doesn't really need much explanation, does it? It's so obvious, blindingly beautiful. I think that we can assume that everybody can do peacock. Possibility that you could confuse the underside with the small tortoiseshell, but you might remember there was that usually grey band, but in our small tortoiseshell, bluish band, and a much darker and then pale edge, whereas the peacock, less contrast between them. But it is possible, especially if you see them in a dark place hibernating in the winter, to find them hard to tell apart. Right, we finished with an invalid. The whites include the brimstone, which I imagine all of us have seen this year. One of the earliest butterflies to fly around. The female doesn't look yellow, we'll come to that in a minute, but the female is a pale greenish colour and easily mistaken for a white butterfly. The female brimstone is laying eggs on buckthorn. So anywhere where there is a buckthorn, if you hang about long enough, you will see a female brimstone turn up. And anybody who puts a buckthorn into their garden, it's a small bush, a bit like a hawthorn, then you will find the brimstone comes and utilises it. They're very good, especially if you plant it in the sun. They don't so much like laying their eggs on buckthorn bushes in the shade, but they will when the weather's very warm. On the right of the screen in front of you, you've got the clouded yellow as well. Now, I have heard a report of one in the UK this year, and it might well be one that overwintered as a caterpillar, because clouded yellow can overwinter in this country as caterpillars, provided they're somewhere where they don't get a frost of more than about -4. And there's one or two bits along the English south coast where we think the clouded yellows now breed all year round, but the chance of seeing one in our gardens at this time of year in the Chilterns and surrounding us is pretty much nil. I just put it up there because it's a confusion species, and in the summer you could well be having to sort out whether you saw a brimstone or a clouded yellow in the garden. So I hope you can see very pointy wingtips. I'm coming back to wing edges again. Very pointy wing tips on the brimstone. And it's just yellow with some brown spots. The clouded yellow, if it settles, you'll see it's got a black spot here, a white spot on the hind wings, that's a black spot on the forewing, and a white spot on the hind wing. Both these species always settle with their wings closed. But when they fly, this still looks yellow, but this will show you, I hope you can see, I don't know how well this is coming out on people's screens, but the top triangular section here of the forewing looks darker. That's black on the inside wing, and you can see that if the butterfly flies past slowly. I'm not guaranteeing that a clouded yellow will fly past slowly, but if it were to do so, you'd be able to see that black tip. And if you're stood near one, when it takes off, you can see it too, as it opens its wings to launch into the air. So they always settle with their wings shut. They never bask with their wings open. And it's the pointy tips, we're trying to remember to concentrate on the edges, that help you to say that this one is definitely a brimstone and that one isn't. Small white, and I've put male, no I didn't, I put M for male, and large white F for female, because a lot of identification guides, charts, books have a picture of a small white, and for some reason they almost always have the male, that's on the left here, with a single spot, just one single black spot, roughly in the center of the forewing. But they never have a picture of a female of the large white with 2 spots. In fact, there's a third smudge there, which can't really be seen in this picture. And that confuses lots of people who think if they see a butterfly with 2 spots on the forewing, it must be a large white, because that's what their identification guide or their identification chart shows them. That's not the case. A small white female would also have 2 spots and a black smudge, and a large white male would have a single spot. But to identify the two to species, we're looking at the wing tips and edges. So the forewing tip and edge. And lucky for us, the names make it easy. The small white has a really small area of usually grey at the tip, and it does not come down this edge. The large white has a really large area, and it does come down the edge, and you could say it was in the shape of a letter L, which just helps because it's a large white, so it's got an L shape. Okay, so hardly any markings on this wingtip, small amount, small white, lots of marking, very bold, very black. A large amount is a large white. Easy, except that both these butterflies are capable of flying straight past you and you don't get much chance to see. They hardly ever stop, I'm afraid. Orange tip can be guilty of that, but at least it's easy because we've got these nice orange tips.
Nick, before we leave the whites, sorry, question from Elaine around, are the two butterflies, the small and the large white, different sizes? And if so, I guess, are they markedly different?
I'm afraid, no.
Okay.
You can, unfortunately, the names are often given to things without a great deal of thought about what might come along later. So some things are called common, and then somebody discovers that actually it's a rare thing. But the small white is usually smaller than the large white, but it isn't always. So you can get small versions of large white and large versions of the small white, which will be the same size. So I certainly wouldn't use the size as a guide to the absolutely certain identification. It's a help, but it isn't enough. You really need to see these wingtips. That's the only thing that will definitely separate them. Okay, on to the orange tip. As I say, orange tips, good. If we look at the wing tips, we notice that unlike the previous species, here we've got a black and white checkered margin. And that's important. We'll come on to that in a further slide later. That's really important. So wing tips again. You don't really need it with the orange tip male, which this is, because it's got the bright orange. And if it settles, you've got this fantastic filigree underside, the trace work of yellow and black spots that look green. Fantastic. And I stuck a picture of the egg in because they're easy to find at this time of year, and they're bright orange, so they stand out. If anybody wants to ask about the egg, I'll go into where you might find them, but I'll move on because I know we're pushed for time. So now we've got the female orange tip. Can you see, look, the same checkered edge to the wing, the same wing edges, checkered black and white. There's no orange, but it's got exactly the same wing edge. So if we go back to the small white and the large white, there is none of that checkering. It's either solid black all the way around, or it's just a grey smudge, no checkering. The female orange tip, which could easily be mistaken for a small white, look at the checkering. It's all down to wing tips and wing edges. This is a green veined white on the right. And again, you could, I suppose, argue, well, that looks a bit checkered. But I would say that whereas this is black and white checkers, alternate black and white, this is, I've called them chevrons, you might call them triangles, I don't know what shape you'd call them, but where the veins come to the edge of the wing, you can see a grey mark in the shape of a triangle or chevron. And it isn't like the small white, to go back, just a smudge at the top and then white. It's definitely the case that these come down the wing. So triangles down the wing. Now you might say, well, why do you need to worry about that? Because you can see the veins. The green vein white is called, another stupid name, the green vein white is called the green vein white because it's got grey veins. Really obvious, look. But they're not always so obvious. These marks here are, but sometimes these marks are so faint you can't really discern them, but you can always see these marks here. So if we just go back through those four, small white, very small amount of grey just at the wingtip. Large white, large amounts of black in the shape of an L. orange tip. The female with no orange, but a checkered margin, and the green veined white with these little triangles coming in at the wing edge, right the way down this side, a similar grey smudge there to the small white, but then these additional triangles. Those 4 will all be in everybody's garden, and very often they're just referred to as cabbage whites, but they are 4 different species.
Okay. And Nick, a question while we're on whites. I guess they're kind of like the little brown jobs of the butterfly world, aren't they? But question from Michael about, is there anything you can look for to differentiate the whites when they're on the wing, when they're in flight?
The only thing you can do is hope that you get a sufficiently good view of the wing tip. If it's really black, it's a large white. And if you don't see that, then I'm afraid you've probably got no idea. You might, if it's an orange tip, male or female, you might be able to see this greenish colour on the underside. Might. Usually you can't. I'm afraid the whites are really tricky. Just like your little brown jobs that always find at least one large sycamore leaf to hide behind when they're in a tree where you think you should be able to see them because there isn't much foliage. The whites always seem to fly past without coming close enough to show you any identifying feature. If they settle, it's dead easy once you know what to look for. But if they fly past, I'm afraid it's impossible. And people find that hard to believe, but I think it is impossible. Okay. Green vein white underside, you're welcome. Green vein white underside, we can see these grey veins again. They look greenish because the underwing is yellow, the ground colour is yellowish, and the grey veins across them give a green tinge. You can still see those little triangles, look here, which will always be present. Oops, sorry, which will always be present. But if your butterfly is as well marked as this one and it's had its wings shut, then those veins show you it's clearly a green vein white. Small copper. We've left the whites. The really tricky ones are behind. Small copper. If you're lucky, and I think you'd be very lucky because I love this little butterfly, you'll have this in your garden, but most of us won't. It feeds on sorrels and it can occasionally feed on dock. And unfortunately, most people don't have sorrel and dock in their garden for very long because when they find it, they pull it up and get rid of it. But if you've got some really tiny sorrel plants in an area of bare ground, then the small copper can breed in your garden. So we're not talking about great big docks growing in long grass. They won't use that, I'm afraid. It's too cool a position. But if you've got some bare ground, maybe a bit of a vegetable plot, which you normally hoe, and a tiny sorrel plant starts to grow in there, then in the tiniest leaves, you might find a small copper caterpillar feeding in an area where it's very warm because it's in the sun, it's warmed up by radiant heat from the bare soil around it, and that's the sort of place that small copper caterpillars live. And then later, of course, you'll see the small copper butterfly, which are flying at the minute. It's unique in having this orange forewing and the black hindwing with another orange edge here. So no other butterfly in Britain has orange and then black and then orange. So if we're looking at wing edges, that this one isn't really working for us. It's the contrast between the forewing and the hindwing. Oddly, when you look at the underside, you don't see the same black that you have here on this hindwing in the underside of the small copper, but it is orange and then it's a sort of fawn colour, isn't it? I'm afraid that's one you just got to learn, that there is this strange disparity between what it looks like on one side and what it looks like on the other. But a beautiful butterfly, and I really hope you get to see it in your gardens this summer. But now we're into the blues. The small copper is a member of the same family as the blues, but obviously a very different colour. And we're going to start with the two that will cause people trouble in their garden. Up till now, any blue butterfly you've seen in your garden this year was almost certainly the holly blue. And these are the male butterflies of holly blue and common blue. The common blue is just starting to fly. So over the next fortnight, you might see common blue in your garden. Now, because my brain is quite small and gets cluttered up with things easily, I try and make it simple. Holly blue, I remember, is more likely to be seen flying around at head height. It flies higher. The holly blue flies higher than the common blue, which tends to fly around sort of below your knee, because the holly blue breeds on a whole variety of shrubs and bushes. So it flies around the tops of the shrubs and bushes. The male is looking for females at the tops of the shrubs and bushes, and she's up there laying eggs on the berries, the developing berries, flowers and developing berries of the various shrubs and bushes. The common blue female lays her eggs on plants like bird's-foot trefoil and hop trefoil, plants that grow in your lawn. So it's down at ground level in very short turf, and it doesn't fly up very often. Holly blue will occasionally come down in very dry weather. Holly blue will come down to the ground looking for moisture. And occasionally the common blue will fly up high to go over a hedge, but it doesn't often. So anything you see that's blue and flying really high is almost certainly a holly blue. Anything you see that's blue and flying around for a lengthy period near the ground is probably a common blue. If they settle, rather like the orange tip, look, we've got a checkered margin to the edge of the holly blue on the forewing, and we've got a completely white, completely plain margin on the common blue. But if it settles and it closes its wings, even more of a giveaway is the fact that the common blue has these red or orange triangular marks, which are called lunules. Word of the week, lunule. Quite a nice word, isn't it? I feel like a Miranda Hart moment coming on. Lunules. Over here, the holly blue, look, is completely black and white. There's no other colour, just black and white. When it flies, the holly blue looks paler because you alternately see the blue followed by the white as it opens and closes its wings. The common blue looks a little darker because the underside of the common blue is a sort of greyish colour, isn't it? So this will look darker in flight. But you really do need these two species to settle to be certain. And you're looking at the wing edges, checkered in the holly blue, plain in the common blue. And if they settle, these red-orange lunules are a real giveaway because the holly blue is just white. So remember, folks, that's the male. Now, I don't think I've got a picture. I might have a picture of a female holly blue. The only difference with a female holly blue is that there is more extensive black in the wingtip. So it looks absolutely the same in every respect, except where there is a small amount of black on the holly blue male, there is more black on the holly blue female. So she's the holly blue, and a female, which is unusual among blue butterflies in being blue. That might sound like a crazy comment, but most blue butterflies have females that are brown, but the holly blue has a blue female, same colour blue as the male. The common blue, however, has a brown female. Let's have a look. So here we are. Here's the common blue female, and she's brown with some blue showing. The same plain margin though, notice, look, completely white, unbroken margin. The brown Argus, which will also be in your garden, looks an awful lot like it. The brown Argus, although we can't see it very clearly on this wing because of the way the cameras work, here, here, and here you can see black marks extending into the white margin. So the holly blue had checkered fringes. The brown Argus has less obvious but still checkered fringes, and the common blue is always completely plain. It is common and plain, and the others have checkered fringes. But it was also explained to me by Graham Hawker, who put these slides together, that you can compare these two and say it's as if the brown Argus, whenever you see it, it looks like it's just put on its really best clothes. It's off to get married. It's going to a wedding. And it's got its best clothes straight from the shop, and they're expensive clothes. It looks really smart. The common blue, on the other hand, looks like this is some clothes it's worn to a wedding and a couple of funerals several times, and it's now just wearing them to work every day. They've got a bit dowdy. And you can see the lack of contrast. This is a fresh female, but she just lacks the same punch, the same visual in your face as the brown Argus. This is a very punchy, contrasty look. And this is a more subdued look. And the reason might be, when you see them, that this female is trying to stay out of sight. She's got her eggs to lay. She doesn't want to be disturbed by males too much, trying to mate with her when she's trying to lay eggs, and she certainly doesn't want to attract the attention of spiders and birds. So she's trying to be unobtrusive. The brown Argus doesn't seem to adopt that. It always seems to be very punchy and very lively, which is quite a good way to tell them apart. The male brown Argus looks virtually identical to the female. The only difference is that if you look at the wing tips right at the top, maybe that little orange-red lunule just there would be missing. So the very topmost one might not be present in a male, but otherwise it looks just the same. So the holly blue we heard was unusual because both the blue, male and female, are blue, and the brown Argus is unusual because both the male and female are brown. Whereas most blues, the males are blue and the female is brown. Okay.
Picking up, Nick, on your point around tonight's word of the night, the lunule. Elaine, thanks, done a bit of Googling. A lunule is apparently, a lunule is a crescent-shaped body part or marking, e.g. the white part of your nails, and also on the outside of some bivalves. If you wanted a bit more background to tonight's word of the night.
And butterflies.
Butterfly wings, they should put that in the Oxford English Dictionary. Thanks, Elaine.
They certainly should. Okay, yeah, thanks for that. So, if we're looking at the underside, if these two butterflies perch, common blue and brown Argus, I'm sorry this is slightly confusing because previously we had the common blue on the left, but I borrowed this from the internet, this picture. I'm afraid I don't know who produced it originally. Anyway, brown Argus on the left this time. You can see very similar pattern. We've got the same sort of orangey red lunules around the outside, but can you see, I hope you can on your screen, this is not the best picture, but you can see the black veins extending through the white border. So the margin is once again checkered on the brown Argus. So the brown Argus, the white margin is broken by these black veins. And the common blue, it's completely plain. But there's another really good clue, which is the spots. So if you look at these two spots here, which some people say it's a figure of 8, some say it looks like a colon, and we look at the same two spots on the common blue, if you watch where my mouse is moving, it's these two spots. So in the common blue, there's a sort of a circle of spots. It's not a very good circle, but there's a sort of circle of spots which go around the central spot here. That's called the cell spot, and they go around in a fairly smooth way. But if you come to the brown Argus, it's all higgledy-piggledy. Look, and those two spots are in a different position. They're pulled together. This particular spot has moved down. So it would be there where my line from figure of 8 word at the top, where that line joins the circle, that spot should be there if this was a common blue. And also, back to my alliteration, brown Argus has a bare area just here. And in the common blue, there is a spot there. Just put this up here. With blue species, the underside is often more help, but that isn't any help to you if it's not going to show you its underside. But if you do get a chance to look at the underside, if you're going to take a photo, that's the side to take the picture of. And if you are going to take a photo, then I would suggest that you have a pretty good look at it first before you start the butterfly. Have a look at the butterfly for a while first before you get your camera out, because I think we all know what happens with a butterfly. It settles, you think, oh great, you look in your bag for your camera, you get your camera out, make sure it's switched on, take the lens cap off and look around and the butterfly's already gone. So I would suggest try and get a look first and take the picture second, unless the camera is in your hand, switched on and ready to go.
Suggestion also from Jackie, taking binoculars out, or we associate binoculars with birds.
Oh yes.
Taking your binoculars with you, and a suggestion around a magnification type. I think Jackie uses a 6.5 by 21, but would you suggest that's the right kind of ratio for butterflies, or a more of an 842 kind of more birdie size? What would be your recommendation?
The answer is, I'm afraid I don't know, but I have a pair of binoculars that was sold as close focus.
Yep.
So I'm not sure that the actual size of the objective lens or the eyepiece makes any difference. I think it's the fact that some of them can focus much closer to you than others. So you want a close focus binocular. Yep. And the magnification doesn't really need to be as much as 8, but 8's probably sensible. Getting up to 10 is probably a bit too much. If we're recording butterflies, and I really hope you will, please, that you'll get out there and you'll see things, you'll love seeing them, and you'll record them. I think the most important thing is to love what you're seeing. And second most important, please record them so that we know how they're getting on. But only when you're 100% certain that you know what it is. Please don't record guesses, because it just confuses everybody later. And although I have this question endlessly when I do this sort of training with a live audience, people tell me, but if you've seen a white butterfly, surely you've got to put something down. Well, no, because it isn't any help to anyone to know that you saw something, but we don't know what it was. So a bit like if you go out looking for birds and you see a seagull out at sea half a mile out. Well, I certainly wouldn't know what it was. And just to say I saw a seagull wouldn't really help anyone very much. So we don't record them unless we're certain. This is the bit that some people struggle with. I think it's a simple idea. The max number of any butterfly that is seen simultaneously. So if you're in the garden looking at butterflies and your wife comes out to ask if you'd like a cup of tea and then she comes back with it, you don't say you've got 2 wives because you've seen a wife twice. If you're in the garden looking for butterflies and a butterfly flies into the garden, out again, and then comes back, we have to assume it's the same butterfly. In some cases, like with the brimstone, the males and females are quite obviously different, and you can count 1 of each. So that would make 2 sightings. But if you see what might be the same male twice, that's only 1, I'm afraid, and not 2. How are we going to record? Well, you might like to start on paper. You might not, but let's assume you might like to start on paper. And then you could go to this web link, which I put there, and I think this recording is going to be available, so you'll be able to get it from that, or ask Nick or myself, and we'll provide that to you. And then you can get to download some surveys, for instance, the Butterfly Garden Survey. Now, there are 2 different butterfly surveys. This is our local one, and there's another one very similar for nationally, but I'm presuming you might want to try the local one. Some people prefer, you people are online watching this, so probably this doesn't apply to you. Some people prefer to do everything on paper and then post it off to us or email it to us later. But more people are starting to use their phones, and I find this far easier. I don't write things down at all anymore. I use this free app. So if you go to Google Play or the iStore, you can find I Record Butterflies as a free app. You load it into your phone, and once it's loaded, you'll see this screen. And you can either choose to record a single butterfly, if that's all you've seen, or if you're in your garden, you could say you're going to survey an area. Now, you could survey an area and keep that open the whole day. and just record what you see through the whole day by opening it once. So let's suppose that we do click on survey an area. It takes us to this screen, and you have to set the location, the first thing you do. Now, please don't put down my garden, because when it goes off to the people who have to go through the records, that won't mean anything to them. And I did see on iRecord the other day a person who'd recorded my garden, the street to the post office, and near the school as the 3 locations he'd recorded. Well, that isn't much help to anybody. So they want the name of a village or part of a town. Even Newbury is a bit vague, isn't it? And you can save these as favorite locations, so you don't have to keep writing the name of the street and your house number or whatever. And then you choose whether you want to record around a point, around a 100-meter square, if you've got a garden that big, or a kilometer if you're going to go out for your daily exercise, perhaps, and include that. Then you click here, it will say get my location, and that's already been clicked, and your phone will geolocate you, assuming you've got that switched on, immediately, so you haven't got to worry about where was I. That will all go off with the information about the butterflies. Then you choose, just here, look, use this location. If you're worried that for some reason it's gone wrong, you can always reload, but I've never bothered. Use this location, click that, and you get to this page where you're asked to add species. Now, what's really clever about this, in my opinion, not only is it already geolocated you and you haven't got to worry about where you were, it's put in the date for you because it knows what day it is, and it brings up the butterflies that you are most likely to see in that location on that date in order down the screen. And you just click on each one. Now, whoever did this survey they saw 6 peacocks, so they clicked the plus button. They clicked it once to put 1 peacock. So if you just click on the picture of the peacock, it comes into this screen, and then they've clicked it 5 times more to make that 6. And through the day, they added these butterflies by adding add species and then clicking on a picture to show which ones they wanted to add. And they've clicked the plus buttons to add extras if they've seen more than one. All of these, for some reason, we're only seeing once, but that's the way it is sometimes, isn't it? If, going back to the home screen, where were we? If you chose down here, butterfly guide, instead of survey, oh, hang on, one bit I've not told you. At the end of doing all this and getting all your butterflies that you've seen that day, there'll be a little bit at the top here, look, says send, and you click that, and it says to you, do you want to send it now, or do you want to wait till you've got a better connection? And you can choose send now and use up your valuable data limit, or you can choose send later and wait till you get to a Wi-Fi connection. It's entirely up to you. Okay, but you might have chosen to look at the guide because you weren't sure about after today's training. There's no trouble, of course, but some people who've not had the benefit of the training might like to look at these pictures in the butterfly guide. So supposing we'd just seen a white and we weren't sure, we thought it might have been a green veined, we'd look at the butterfly guide page and we'd click on that picture, and up comes a whole load of information about it. We could choose show a map to show where it's seen in the country, and for the green vein white, that's everywhere. But you've also got identification tips, size, what time of year it flies, the habitats, and so on, plus extra information down there. So it's a really complete package for free, and it all goes off into the national database, which is great. Now, specifically because of COVID-19, Butterfly Conservation have produced a slightly slimmed down version which works on PCs and tablets. And if you want to, you can get this from Butterfly Conservation. Here we are, look, butterflyrecording.org. This is for garden records this year. And when you go into this program, you get effectively a choice of these on your PC or tablet. You can enter records. Once you've done that, you can explore your records, or you can look to see what other people have recorded, and you can download them so you can keep a set for yourself at home. This, should have said, this is after you've registered to use it. So you do have to register. You'll have to tell them your email address, and despite the fact I think Butterfly Conservation are a thoroughly wonderful organisation, I do feel I should warn you, they will email you afterwards to say, would you like to be a member? How about taking some of our email? How about taking some of our newsletters? We're sending out lots of electronic newsletters, and you could have some. And they might do that repeatedly until you tell them to stop, unless you enjoy receiving their emails and newsletters. So this is specifically for garden butterflies, and therefore it's slightly easier. It's not got all the things that you won't see in a garden. But if you do fancy taking on something that has all the butterflies you might see anywhere, plus everything else, then on your phone, PC, tablet, anywhere, you can get this iRecord, and you can record literally everything. Now, I use this on my PC because I find it easier to type things in than on my phone, because you have to begin your if you thought you'd seen one of these dragonflies, you'd have to begin by saying dragonfly, and then it would bring up a list of options. So unlike the butterfly, because there's so much data in here, it doesn't come up with a whole load of stuff at the beginning that you might have seen. It leaves you to tell it what you think you've seen, and that's a problem. If you don't actually know what you've seen, it's hard to tell the program what it was so it can give you a choice. But for those who are really into recording a whole plethora of stuff, this is brilliant. And you could literally spend all day in your garden working with this and probably not get finished before it was dark. If you start doing all the tiny things, springtails and thrips, if you then go on to the worms and the snails and the slugs, and then you do the plants, and then you get into the insects, and then do the birds and the mammals, you could be all day and not get finished, I'm sure. It's a wonderful program, but it's a bit more complicated. Now, moths, I told Jasper earlier we weren't going to mention moths, but I just thought I'd mention the recording of moths. It's a slightly different scheme. You'll see, I hope, it says you can start by registering here. So we're at Butterfly Conservation. Go into the conservation section where you'll find the recording information, and you can join the National Moth Recording Scheme. And there's also something called Moths Count Online Recording, which is a slightly separate scheme, which goes straight to the county moth recorders, but it's all gets into the same database in the end. You might prefer to go that way. And there's information on our own Upper Thames Branch Butterfly Conservation website about our county moth recorders. There are 3 in our area, and it might surprise you to learn that the ones for Berkshire cover all this way here, right up to Oxford, look, over to Farringdon and up to Oxford and then down, and they take a bit of what I would have thought was bucks. That's Berkshire in terms of moths. Moths haven't quite caught up with the modern geopolitical maps, and moths still think they're living in the 1950s. So Oxford's shrunk, Bucks has lost a bit down there, and it includes Milton Keynes, just in case you're wondering. So each of these different areas, VC24 is Martin Albertini, VC23 is Martin Townsend, and VC21 is Martin Harvey. They're the people who record, and all that information is on our website. There's lots of other online resources. I'm not going to try and read this to you. I think Nick's going to make it available, as he said, with a recording, so you'll be able to read it at your leisure by pausing the video. Loads of stuff you can find about recording things. So I just wanted one more thing to say. It's so important that we record. I once went to a conference about butterfly recording, and to my amazement, there was an MP from Belgium who came to thank us because the whole of Europe uses our butterfly records to help decide whether their agri-environmental schemes are working, which astounded me. Europe uses our records because we are so good. And if you go online, you'll find this was at UK BMS, that stands for United Kingdom Butterfly Monitoring Scheme. The UK BMS have loads of reports about stuff that's come in, and you can see, this is the most recent report, that for instance, the swallowtail is down by 42% in the last 10 years. The dingy skipper is down by 25%. The grizzled skipper down by 50%, and so on. The Essex skipper, oddly, up by 125, but not in the last 3 years, but that's over the last 10, and so on. So all these different species, you get loads of information, and this goes off to government. It isn't just for us butterfly nerds to look at. Every year there's a state of nature that the RSPB, the BTO, ourselves, Plant Life and People put information into that goes to government to inform them about whether their conservation measures are working. So a really worthwhile thing to get involved in the recording. But foremost, go out there and enjoy seeing the butterflies. Record them as a secondary activity once you've enjoyed their beauty, because they are wonderful. Thanks very much. I don't know how many people managed to stick with me all that time, because if they did, that's very good. Well done. I can see at least 3 people still with me. That's all that fit on the screen. But thanks ever so much, everyone.